That's all right. Howdy, partners. Howdy, partners. That was a greeting from these certain individuals that I would see when I was 7 years old. And we all went to the cinema, the movies. In Jamaica, we say the pictures. Why? Because today I'm going to talk about something that was very important for me, and I know it was a great pleasure amongst some of my forebearers in this world of music, jazz, if you will. I've heard that people I looked up to that preceded my coming on the scene, people such as Horace Silver, people such as Idris Muhammad, people such as Charlie Parker. And one of the delights that they had weekly on a Saturday was to go to the pictures to see these individuals that were making these Western movies. They call them B-Westerns. They were very childlike stories that all had the same ending. The good guy, the bad guy, right? Now nobody's good only or bad only. The bad guy got some good in him and the good guy got some bad in him. So I'm going to spend this next few moments honoring a man and a place where it represents a time of my life where I would see this kind of item clothing worn, right? These were the Cowboys. Now we say in Jamaica, I'm going to hail up a town called Idlewild, California, right near Palm Springs. Idlewild, not the airport, which is what John F. Kennedy was known as before it became the John F. Kennedy Airport in tribute to the president, Kennedy, right? So this is me remembering an individual that was so exceptional in many, many ways, multifaceted, larger than life. He lived in Idlewild, which now has a marvelous music festival, a jazz festival. And his name was Herb Jeffries. Herb Jeffries. And before I continue, I want to introduce my co-pilot, number one helper, because I'll be forgetting stuff and she's gonna remind me as I go along. But we got into this thing where I wanted to share with you a name that can be easily forgotten. Now, many of us know great musicians of the past, famous people. We know about Sinatra, we know about Nat King Cole, we know about all these great men. And one of them that had a wonderful vocal career because he was the singer in the late 30s, early 40s with the great Duke Ellington Orchestra. His name was Herb Jeffries, right? I said that already, I think. And I spoke a little about him before, but today I want to talk about Idlewild because that's where Herb resided, up in that mountain area where it was snowing. And I went to visit my friend Herb. I had met him at one of these Western conventions because all through my years as a young guy growing up, I remember this wonderful time when me and my buddies from school would make sure we went to the pictures on Saturday. The same way that Charlie Parker went and that enlivened his existence as a kid, and he ended up being the great musician, right? But you can be sure that what happened in those movies, like with me, like with Horace Silver, like with Idris Muhammad, it enriched his whole outlook on life because it was a fantasy. It wasn't real. We used to call them morality tales because these movies, the good guy would win and he would ride off on his horse. So right now we're streaming to the Jazz Festival in Idlewild. And just be aware of that. Hello to you all.
Idlewild.
Idlewild, California. I remember going there to visit Mr. Jeffries, the Bronze Buckaroo. Now, here's that picture of him singing with Ellington, right? But a few years after that, Herb decided he wanted to pay attention to the youth of America that were not white, people that were of a different background, somewhat different ethnic origins. And he thought it would be important to become a cowboy star like these Western heroes were, and I'll tell you about some of them right now. Names that will mean nothing, I'm sure, to most people watching Monty Alexander right now. I got this hat on, I got my Western thing, I got my Jamaica in mind, That's me back in the 60s. Young Monty playing the piano. I was all over the place in those days, right? But Herb Jeffries decided to seek out a Hollywood producer to make movies about a man of color who was also bad cowboy. Bad meaning street bad, meaning he was awesome, right? So he was the black cowboy. He was known as the Bronze Buckaroo. So there is, you hold it up, sweets, and that is Herb when he made one of several films where he was known as the Bronze Buckaroo and became a hero to a lot of young African American children in those days. I'm talking about the mid 40s, late 40s, 50s, and go on up. And I remember all these guys I'm going to tell you. Now, as I wear this clothes, I'm thinking of a cowboy hero that we all love. His name was the Durango Kid. And I left my mask over there. Here it is. Okay. And there was another guy who wore the black and he rode on a white horse. His name was Zorro. In fact, Zorro became a legendary figure in the Mexican mythology. And they rode these horses with beautiful silver studs all over the saddles. It was magnificent. And then later on, Hopalong Cassidy came along. Now, once again, I'm saying, I know this sounds trivial to a lot of people who don't know anything because it's not fashionable anymore with a lot of people to talk about those days because these guys wore guns. And the guns in those days when they were needing to have the guns because the bad guys, the good guys, the sheriff, the marshal, there was this thing called needing to have law and order. But hardly in those movies would these particular cowboys shoot and draw blood when they would shoot the bad guy, right? So it's not fashionable anymore, but I'm telling you, this was a rich part of American culture coming up through the decades. Oh, there she is. I was, Jamaica, we say I was a little boy.
You live and you learn.
I was a little boy, but no, I'm still loving it because I could sit there for hours watching those old films, and I'm talking about stars like Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, and by the way, those two men did the singing of these Western songs like these, and in fact, I shall give a little, I'll go back to Herb Jeffries in a minute, but like... Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam and the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Okay, that's Home on the Range. That was almost like an anthem to people who love the idea of the West. Herb Jeffries sang those songs, Roy Rogers sang those songs, Gene Autry sang those songs, and I'm going to play you another one that I love. Gene Autry brought this song in the forefront. This is the predecessor to Willie Nelson, for example, because Willie, in fact, I heard Willie called his son, named him Gene Autry, right? It's like Ellis Marsalis named his son after Wynton Kelly. We call him Wynton Marsalis. So, okay, here's let's just go back in the saddle. I'm back in the saddle again, back in the saddle again. And then you heard the rustlers in these westerns, the guys who would take the horses away and the cattle, and that was a terrible crime because if they caught you, that was it, right? So here's a scene, the rustlers, commotion, they're shooting the guns, and I'm going to the piano and I'm doing this. So that's the gun shot, right? When we shoot the other kids. And you'd hear the horses, right? And the horses are all upset and all of that. And you hear a song called Ghost Riders in the Sky. movie that Gene Autry had done. And I had nightmares for years because I saw the ghost riders in the sky, and it was very surreal and made you shudder because the, the, the bad guys had gone to hell, the good guys went to heaven. So these were all images as a kid that I received. And then there was a song that was Johnny Mercer, I think, wrote the song. It's called "I'm an Old Cowhand." I'm an old cowhand. Roy Rogers had a song called "Happy Trails," written by his wife Dale Evans, and it was like this. Happy trails to you. You know it what?
Until we meet again.
Happy trails to you.
Keep smiling until then. Who cares about the rain if we're together? Sing a song and bring the sunny
Again. Okay. Western songs, and I'm telling you folks, this was an important time back in the early 40s when a lot of us, especially in the African American community, were going to these movies, and that's a part of what grew us up in a good way because it told us, you know, what goodness was all about. And we wanted to be like these people because they represented goodness, you know. And I was fortunate to have that, as well as a couple of parents, and what I heard the preacher in the church say in his way, the same things that the father of Nat King Cole said, why Nat wrote a song called "Straighten Up and Fly Right." So I heard that kind of language, and that affected me in a very, very good way.
Speaking of Nat King Cole, look what we found. The billboard, the first concert you saw, March 1955.
1955, March of 1955. I went to this concert near the middle towards the end, and I saw my great hero, both this man and Louis Armstrong, a man I met, shook his hand, didn't wash my hand for a month, I guess, but I saw Nat King Cole
At the Carib.
at the Carib Theater, 1955. I was 11 years old. Yes, and a truly unforgettable moment. You know that song? Unforgettable. That's what Nat King Cole was.
That's
So
thanks
folks-
to Wilfrid Walt.
Thanks to Wilfrid Wall. Yes, he discovered it, sent it to me, and in fact, he's got a wonderful new book he just wrote on the life of Nat King Cole. And Will is probably the greatest writer about music artists, and he did it for Sinatra as well. And now this is called "Straighten Up and Fly Right," the story of Nat King Cole according to Wilfrid Wall. So there is Nat King Cole, and this is about me reminiscing, and I'm trying to remember in a good way. So I'm leaving Idlewild right now, where I said, in fact, there's a great bass player I remember from Washington, Marshall Hawkins. He's up there, and he's a part of the whole jazz scene, and I hope I get to go up there one of these days and maybe play a tune. In fact, I remember it most fondly because, you know, in those days, Herb had already had a disability, and he was in a wheelchair, but he still had his 10-gallon Western hat and his regalia and fringes, and he was such a man of such great dignity, and he was known as the Bronze Buckaroo all through the years.
And he got his star on Broadway.
No, Hollywood Boulevard.
Hollywood.
And there's,
Sorry.
yeah,
We're in New York.
yeah, and this is his wife Savannah, and I ended up playing a concert for him on his 99th year, just before he was going to be 100. And I was there playing in Lone Pine, California. I did a concert, and I introduced some of these Western themes. And the sadness of the whole thing is that he passed just before he had that 100th birthday. So long again, Herb, some years after that, and and in fact, he told me once that he had recorded Nature Boy. There was a boy, da, 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 da. He did it before Nat King Cole. He had recorded an a cappella version of that song because he was good friends with the composer, a man named Eden Abez, who was a natural guy who lived out in the park and he ate the berries, and he brought that song to Nat King Cole, but he had already brought it to Herb Jeffries, who recorded it. So, little trivia for you. So now, my early history in Jamaica, I showed you this when I was 1955, Nat King Cole, and I'm going to be reminded by some old artifacts that were kindly brought to us by our good friend Christine from South Africa, and delightful lady, and she spotted all this stuff. And here's a concert of Monty and the Cyclones, I'll have you know. And my name is down there along with this very popular musician named Byron Lee, and his Dragonaires, they called him. And Byron was beloved guy. He had a dancing band, and they played all the rhythms, the calypsos, and this is before ska, before reggae. And there I was with my group called Monty and the Cyclones, some other guys from my school, Jamaica College. And we tore it up, let me tell you. We all had the same red shirts on and turned up the collar like if you were a slick guy in Hollywood. And I played the accordion, and we had a couple of hit songs on the radio.
Here in the hit parade. Look, see, Monty and the Cyclones, number 9. See?
What year is that?
1960. You were 16. See?
16.
Number 9 over there. Monty and the Cyclones. And you were playing, guess what? South of the Border. It was a Jamaican version of South of the Border. How did you play it? Remember? How did you play it then? 16.
I
Remember?
don't remember. It had
I gotta
a
hear
beat though.
that ring.
South of the border, down Mexico way, I left my love. She didn't give a hoot. I can't remember the lyric, but that's called South of the Border. And it was introduced by Gene Autry. Now here, I had to accompany this particular lady, and it was a joy and a pleasure to observe this lady doing her thing. And there is me playing Monty and the Cyclones for Princess Naila. She was an awesome belly dancer that came down from America. She came to Jamaica. And
Princess Naila. £100, so it was British, see? British money.
the British money. £100 to see that show?
Yeah.
That's a rip. I mean, she was gorgeous, but wait a minute. I never knew that. Okay, it must have been Jamaican pounds, and they were a lot less.
Like Jamaican dollars today.
Yeah, I guess so. So there are two evidences of Monty Alexander in the early days of Jamaica.
But
Because then, you know, I was there having a full life and playing all over the place and trying to stay out of trouble.
Until you left.
Until I left, and then the next thing you know is we went to Miami, and I started playing all around Miami Beach, Miami, Florida, playing in what would be known as Overtown, where you hardly saw the white folks. This was all soul, as we used to say. Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson, and I saw these guys playing, and there was a wonderful jazz community there, guys who loved bebop music, you know, Bud Powell and Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, and they were playing at the Mary Elizabeth Hotel. I would go there and go sit in, you know, and this is like I'm just 18 years old, but I was well involved with the community as well as the guys on Miami Beach who wanted to be around the brothers and sisters over on the other side and play music like they did, that had that grit, that spirit that was identifiably soulful, as we used to call it. So there I was in the midst of that, and that's where I met. Once again, I've told these stories before, and I'm rambling along as usual, and people sometimes enjoy it. Sometimes when I look back at myself, I said, Monty, you talk too much. There's too much going on. But it's in my head. So as I do these talks, I realize I'm telling my life story, which could be good fodder or good stuff to draw on for the book that people say. You got to write the book. You got to write the book. So there I was around this crowd of people in Miami Beach, Florida, and a lot of the people there were night crowd people. They like to drink a lot, and you'd see the sharp characters, and sometimes people would say, "Hey, those people are coming from the other side of the world," which is like, and there was the gangsters were there, and the ladies of the night. Some people call them hookers, and I'm playing the piano in these bars and having the time of my life. So, um, that's where I met Sinatra, Frank Sinatra, and he used to come to eat at this place on his way going back to wherever, I don't know. He and his friend Jilly, who hired me across. I was playing across the street at the Bonfire Restaurant. This is 1960, 62, 62, mid 62. Actually, this is before I met him. And there he is at what's called Fun Fair, eating the most delicious hot dogs.
Hell up Abby who gave us this.
And this is Abby came. This is Jilly's daughter. Abby did a great turn here and sent me this picture, and I just want to share it. This is Fun Fair, and it was across the street from the Bonfire Restaurant where I was playing until 4 in the morning. Yeah, believe it or not, with a little combo and swinging, because that's how I got my jobs. When I would play, I was bringing, we used to say, fire and brimstone and swinging and joyful music. I didn't know what those, morbid kind of songs, which, hey, we've got to love the morbid songs too, but that's what I was about, bringing joy. I think back on those days, and that was a time to play that way, and that's why our music became so popular. And the truth is, the jazz world increased in popularity because you started to hear it more and more, and it's because of the speakeasies, which were operated by, they used to say, the gangsters, right? And they wanted the music swinging, and they did what they had to do in their culture, and they wanted some swinging jazz, and that's how this music came up, honest to goodness. And then Las Vegas came up on scene, and these places in Las Vegas were full of life, and everybody wanted to go there and gamble and lose their money and win the money, and there's an excitement in the air, and that was my school of life. I didn't go to the academy to learn this, that, what chord. I already knew the chord. My head, it was all filled up in my head. So as I ramble on.
You told me about Frank Sinatra, how you got to New York.
Well, I told that story before, but the truth is, Mr. Frank Sinatra heard me playing at another place, and that's how I came to New York and ended up playing at his friend Jilly's nightclub. Jilly's was on 52nd Street, right off of 8th Avenue, between 8th and Broadway. And I was there playing, and Jilly's next to Frank in that picture. They were best buddies. They were like brothers,
That's Jilly.
And Jilly was a man of much strength, but he never touched the alcohol. He was right there, and Sinatra knew that Frank Sinatra knew that he could have a good time until 5 in the morning, and Jilly was always there looking out for him, making sure that no trouble of any kind would come to his doorstep. So I came to America and had a wonderful beginning where I'm playing. I'm just never out of a gig. I'm playing all over the place.
More pictures.
Okay, so Katarina's bringing me more pictures. And by the way, I have to say this, as I spoke about Herb Jeffries before, I want to call up my friend Alan Harris on the telephone. And I should have called him before, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So bear with me, nice people,
I'll dial him.
as I call my friend Alan, and we're going to remember. Now, Alan is a true proponent of the legacy of the Westerns.
I'm dialing it. What if he doesn't answer?
I would like to think he will. Say it's you. Yeah.
Now I'm putting it on speaker.
All right.
Here we go.
So, folks, you see that we're getting a little
We have
looser here.
high tech technology.
We're getting a little loose here with the programming and everything. But so now I'm going to talk to Alan.
Hello?
Would like to speak to Alan Harris. It's Monty Alexander.
See, wrong number.
That's your finger.
Okay, try again. I told you this was not gonna work. Okay.
Okay.
Just a second.
So
Okay.
Alan has been singing the great songs honoring the forebearers. I've heard him sing in so many contexts and always just beautiful
Hey,
expressions.
there he is.
Is this Alan?
Hey guys, what's up?
Well, I've been enjoying my talk today while I tell them about this, that, blah, 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 and with my brain and all of what I've been through, Alan, it's like I can't stop talking because there's so many aspects to my journey. And you're an important part because you and I share a love of a legacy that seems to have gone by the wayside with today's world, and it was about the westerns. And especially your specialty, you took a lot of time out to talk about the history of the black cowboys, the slaves that escaped from their masters and that and ended up merging with the American Indians, and they were the ones to take care of the cattle. So you, to me, are a real authority on this important part of our history. Mm, well,
Something happened.
that did not work as well as I had hoped it would, dear friends. Maybe we'll get to be able to speak with Alan.
I'll try again.
This presentation is a little looser than most of them.
It's hysterical.
It's
And
yeah,
alive.
but you know.
Things that happen.
So
Hey, it's entertaining, I think.
okay, to say what I was saying, he has devised a program called Cross That River. It's a great piece of work. That's a theatrical play where the theme of it is the black westerns, right? And maybe we had a disconnection. I'm sorry to say, maybe we'll be able to get back with Alan before this is all over. But my next adventures in the United States are playing at the jazz clubs all across America. And that includes Detroit, Chicago, Dayton, and I'm talking about the early 60s, 65. And Katerina found these photographs, once again, thanks to Christine. And I am going to tell you about some of these
So
places.
these were yours.
Right.
This one is kind of
Okay.
cool.
This is a photograph. It's kind of shabby. And that's young Monty. I must have been 23, 24. And that was the year, let's see, 65, 66. And I'm playing at Baker's Keyboard Lounge. That man playing the bass is my friend Paul West, a West Indian that originally from the Virgin Islands, Paul West. And the drummer that you can't see, there's the drum set, is Jimmy Cobb, who just departed this world. We're sorry he's gone ahead. So I'm playing at Baker's
And this other
Keyboard
one.
Lounge. And why I talk about this is that's an era that preceded the advent of the academies and the schools and the colleges teaching something called jazz. The jazz of that world were people showing each other that chord and that note. They were just, hanging out in their little back rooms, say, hey, try this and try that. And it was not a mass situation where a lot of people were together. It was coming on a one-on-one basis. And I myself would go watch my heroes play. And that's how I picked up some of what I got musically, but the big thing I got was the enthusiasm and the love and the people that were playing it. I mean, I was there with Roy Eldridge. I used to go play with Roy and Charlie Shavers. These are our forebearers of another period. You know what I mean?
The article about Keyboard Lounge,
Yes.
where it says a small room. This was by Troy Irvine. It said it's a small room. Was it 34 by 60 feet with seating of about 120, and a card on your table informs you that because of its intimacy and because of the quality of music, please hold talking down to a minute. So already in 1967 they're saying quiet. And then it said the owner was
Solly Hartstein. I remember
that?
Solly and his wife Faye, and they were really nice to me. In fact, once the hotel was all booked up and he asked me to come, invited me to stay at his house, and I got to know him well. And he ran that nightclub, the Baker's Keyboard Lounge, which was on 8 Mile and Livernois in Detroit, and I was there on several occasions. And that place featured Ahmad Jamal, Les McCann, George Shearing, Oscar Peterson, and Monty Alexander, had been there on a few occasions.
The article says, right now this man is reviewing Oscar Peterson, and he said, following Peterson, after the 22nd are Les McCann, Cannonball Adderley, Kenny Burrell, Monty Alexander, Miriam Makeba, Joe Williams,
Okay, so the point is,
Johnny Hartman.
this is a roundabout way of saying I've been here a while, folks, and yes, I'm still in the game. I'm still making recordings. I just did this album a few months ago, and we finally got the vinyl for Warwicker Hill, where I bring Thelonious Monk to part of his roots, which was his proximity to the West Indian population that was in New York City, where he lived from the age of 5. So this recording is infiltrated with yard rhythm, you know. I call it Rasta Monk Vibration. It's my own dream being realized on vinyl, and it became a favorite with people who love Monk's music and Jamaican rhythms, Rastafarian vibrations, and influence of reggae and so on. But it's coming from a musician who's supposedly a jazz musician, but I consider myself a musician, period, right? So there is Rastamonk Vibration. I'm happy to sign it if you're interested. You get it on my website and autographed, montyalexander.com. So that said, I'm going to go back to talking about Detroit, where I played at the Drome Lounge. This is before Baker's Keyboard Lounge, and there's a picture of me
there?
playing there and a sign out
It's
front.
coming.
That's-
You're like right behind there. I have
And
to
if you
show them.
look, you'll see Yusef Lateef, one of our great artists from Detroit, who adopted Islam faith, and this is me gonna play right after him. There's a little.
That I'll show them.
I saw
maybe
this and I was
closer.
shocked because this is 1965.
Yeah, there's a tiny thing there.
I
It
mean,
says
I'm only
Monty.
39 years old.
See
How
there
can that?
behind says Monty coming up.
You move
Monty.
in that camera.
Yeah. See it right behind that man's head.
So that was the Drome Lounge, which featured John Coltrane and Wes Montgomery and all the great artists at the time, and they gave me an opportunity to play there. I remember while I was there, they sent a car from what was called Hitsville, and that was Motown. And we, myself, Bob Cranshaw, and Walter Perkins, went to the recording studio where all these early recordings of Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder and the Supremes, and we played behind a female trio singing group. I can't remember. I'm blanking on that whole experience, but there I was. So I was there just before the riots, when Dr. King was assassinated, but I'd been there on 2 or 3 occasions. And Detroit was, what a place. And that's the place where Kenny Burrell and Tommy Flanagan, Marcus Belgrave and Doug Watkins, J.C. Hurd, my friend Billy Banks, we were talking about this the other day, and just thinking about Detroit, and Baker's, which was a very elegant room for listening, more of a supper club, but the music was there. And when Oscar Peterson was playing there, he was a man that commanded a presence that was like, I'm here, you're here, but you're here to hear me make music, and you are obliged to be quiet and just listen and don't make a noise. And there was a guy who came up to him and asked him to play some song, and he said, could you play something with a melody? Because Oscar was doing his improvisation in an incredible way. And Oscar said, well, if you don't like it, sir, please leave. So,
Yeah,
something to that
if you
effect.
don't like it, get out.
If you don't like it, get out. I doubt that he would have said it like that, but these reviewers, they like to exaggerate. So
I like that.
blah blah blah. So you want to try
Yeah.
Mr. Harris one more
try
time?
Alan again. My goodness, I didn't know it was really going to be this difficult. Let's see.
So folks, this is a little more loose and relaxed, and Alan is this terrific guy, incredible vocalist, and he's a keeper of the flame.
It's ringing.
And if we're lucky, I'll get him.
I'm here.
Oh my
Give me
goodness, I
that.
can't believe it.
I was rounding up the horses for me and Monty.
Hodle, but did you yodel?
Keep it closer to the.
You got it, almost.
Can you hear him? Because the mics are here.
But brother, they got the bronze buckaroo, this man that I had the privilege of introducing you to on the telephone, Herb Jeffries, a great man in our history, not only of the Western mythology, but of our world of jazz, because Herb had joined Duke Ellington Orchestra and he sang that wonderful, great song, Flamingo. And da dee.
Closer to.
And you know what, Monty?
Tell me.
I'm gonna be honest with you, man. It was one of the highlights of career, man. When you introduced me on the phone to Herb Jeffries as a child, watching my mother and all the women in my family swoon over this man as he rode in those race movies on that white horse. I thank you so much, Monty. And then you invited me out to the Alabama Hills.
Well, as I was telling the good folks on this program, how valuable for us at that time in the 40s and the 50s, a rich part of our culture, especially in the African American community, the Westerns. And then when Herb Jeffries came along and was the bronze buckaroo, the people were lined up around the block to see him because he sang and he shot those six guns like and had such a way of delivering his speech that he was a star among stars. And I had some correlations where you saw him. Could you show me that movie script, the title again? I don't know if you're watching this right now, but this is a very special moment because I talked about you and your activities as a big appreciator of the legacy of the Black Cowboys and Cross That River. So how is that going? You're gonna be doing some more of those when all this terrible thing goes away?
Yes. I'm rewriting Pat and we're writing a novel based upon it, and I have a few more songs. I'm revamping it. Why? Because I'm making it a little bit more grittier. The show a little more grittier because of what's happening in the flavor of the country right now. I'm still doing the love scene, but I'm making it more of the Black Cowboys now. They're finding out what their life's like on the trail. What does it feel to be a man of color doing the job that white folks really don't think you can do? So we're going to interject that into the story more.
Well,
but I want to ask you a question.
Please.
Who was it? You told me who was it that convinced Herb Jeffries to become a cowboy and make those movies? Who was it?
Well, Herb told me, and I mean, I spent a lot of downtime with this man. He was larger than life. He was performing in Chicago. I think it was Chicago with Ellington, and he went out to smoke him a cigarette on the break or something, and he saw some kids playing in the alley, playing this game we always used to play. We had two games. One was cops and robbers, the good guy, the bad guy. The other one was cowboys and good cowboys, bad cowboys, and sometimes the actual fact is that cowboys and Indians, making the Indians to be bad people, which is absolutely not true. So
that's right.
So he saw that, and they were all white kids, and one of them was a black kid, right? And they were shooting at each other, usual games that I played as a kid, and they were shooting, imaginary shooting. Hey, he says, who are you? He says, I'm Buck Jones. He was a famous cowboy in the 40s. And the other guy said, who are you? He says, I'm Tim McCoy. He said, who are you? He says, I'm Tom Mix. And they're going on with this thing. And then
his horse, Tony.
Tony was Tom Mix's horse, you're right. And it was, by the way, it was a badge of honor to be able to identify every cowboy's horse. Hey, ask me a cowboy, I'll tell you his horse.
What'd you say?
No, if you ask me a cowboy, mention me a cowboy, I'll tell you his horse.
That's right. Okay, let me think. Hopalong Cassidy.
Topper, Topper. It was a white horse. That was Hoppy and Topper. That's a fact.
So, right, which was bred by it was the king. The name of the breed, it was king. Of white horses called kings. They were.
Okay.
Okay. Let me think of another one. Who was oh God, I can't think. I'm going blank now because
Well, let me tell you. You had Roy Rogers and Trigger. You had Gene Autry and Champion.
Of course you know. Wait, what was Dale Evans' horse name?
Buttermilk.
Oh, okay. What was the name of that German Shepherd?
Bullet.
I'm hanging up.
No, you can't go yet. I'm
hanging up the phone.
No, wait. So I want to demonstrate one more time what the value of these westerns were, where I heard the songs, and I did a little medley just now. I sat at the piano halfway, side saddle, and I played, oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam, and the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard.
Wait, let me test you, because you and I have spent hours together watching Western movies and that, but just for your listeners, because I know there's a side of you that I'd love for them to see, Monty. You're so well rounded. I'm gonna throw something that you would know, and not many people would.
Okay.
Frank Sinatra, and I'm sure you know Frank Sinatra. I'm just joking. Frank Sinatra did a song of Swinging Lovers. One of the songs on there was a song that Gene Autry did. What was it?
South of the Border.
No.
We played it. Didn't you play it?
I just played it on the thing.
You did?
I recorded it with my school, my Monty and the Cyclones band in 1965. No, 55.
It was on the hit parade.
It was on the hit parade in
Jamaica. I had that record. That's right.
Right, and I did it, and that's before the advent of Bob Marley in Jamaica. And I had my band, and we played South of the Border, down Mexico way, right? Right, okay,
that's
so,
right. That's what it is.
but I want to show this now. This is when I made an album with my friend, the great guitar player from Jamaica, Ernest Ranglin, and that's the cover of the album. I don't know if you can see
Is that
this.
when you're drawing the guns?
I'm drawing the gun, and there's Ernie, and he's shooting at me with his guitar. Now, the thing I have to keep saying is a lot of people listening to you and I talk, and you and I have inhabited the world of jazz, and everybody's real serious about jazz and the second. But there was fun, a lot of fun, and
That's right.
people like me with that, I call it almost idiotic way of looking at life, but light-hearted, would bring that into the game. And when I play music, I'm looking for that beautiful fantasy that says we're here to enjoy ourselves. So the westerns
Amen.
were part of that. So when I make my music and I'm doing something like the Jamaican thing with the rock steady rhythm, I bring the westerns into it, And you see me and I'm hanging out with Roy Rogers. That's me and Mr. Roy Rogers, the king of the Cowboys. Can you see that?
I was just telling my guest here that you had met Roy Rogers.
I couldn't believe it when I was standing there next to a man we call the king of the Cowboys with that beautiful, warm, inviting smile, and I just couldn't even speak. I was going like Jackie Gleason in The Honeymooners, humma 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 humma.
Okay.
I didn't know what to say.
I'm gonna tag you again. Monty. I know it's your show, but I love that your listeners are seeing this part of you. What was the name of the group, the musical group that Roy Rogers was in?
The Sons of the Pioneers.
Oh, and who in Gunsmoke, Festus, what was his name?
You talk about James Arness? No.
King Curtis.
Oh yeah.
King Curtis.
Yeah, oh yeah, and he was one heck of a singer, this guy. In fact,
I know.
he joined,
I know.
he sang with Tommy Dorsey's band, I believe, after Sinatra had been there. So Ken Curtis and guys like him had a legacy where they dovetailed and ended up in the westerns. Randall Scott was doing those drawing room movies.
That's right.
Randall Scott and Errol Flynn, the great swashbuckler. He was in the drawing room movies. So anyhow, this is a part of entertainment that dovetails into why I ended up loving this thing called jazz. Because I saw Satchmo in Jamaica. I shook his hand. I think I told you, this concert, I attended this concert. Look at this. This is Nat King Cole. I was 11 years old. I went to that concert when he came to Jamaica. I saw Nat on stage. And these two men. So, my whole life, besides being a musician, I've just been on my own journey collecting wonderful friends in this world of what's called jazz. And it's just one joyful, and here's a picture I want to share with the world. And I saw this picture and it meant a lot to me. Here is Duke Ellington standing next to a man you could obviously see in the respect, mutual respect, Gene Autry and Duke Ellington. There's Duke Ellington.
Wow.
Can you see that?
Move it.
Yes, I'm looking at it right now.
Right.
There.
So
Gene and
I'm privileged to tell these stories and to talk to you right now. And guess what? The next time we talk, and I hope to do this again, we're going to tell them about a place called Miami, Florida. Even though I was there a good 10 years before you were, you saw what Miami was and was not in terms of the vibrations all over the place. And also, I was there when I saw separate water fountains. White people, colored people, all that stuff. I didn't understand that because Jamaicans kind of have a whole different outlook on things, And
But wait, before you go on, I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
Are you there?
I'm
I
here.
want to ask you something. Do you have your cowboy black boots on?
You let me tell you something, pal. Today, I decided to put, because I got a whole bunch of boots, and it's like when you used to go through the TSA at the airport and you had the boots on. You're holding up the line, brother, when you take the boots off and put them back on. Because so I started wearing the comfortable shoes, and right now, I wouldn't lie to you, I got on some comfortable shoes.
Hey, at least you got on pants.
But
well, Bonnie, I tell you, it warmed my heart when was it Jeff Hamilton was with us, and we were at the Alabama Hills. We went out to do that show. And I met you downstairs outside of the hotel. You had that black outfit on, and you had a brand new pair of black boots on. I said, "Look at this cowboy here from Jamaica." Then, what blew my mind was I must have asked you at least 20 questions about movies, knowing that you didn't know any. And Lord knows you knew. Not only did you know the movies, you knew the actors, you knew the horses, you knew the year. I can't wait until this pandemic gets the hell out the way so you come over here. We
I'll tell you right now, Brother Harris, that is a joy and a pleasure to sit with you and your beautiful Miss Pat and enjoy something that we both appreciate, and we wish more people could have received that pleasure in their lives. And let's face it, time is what it is. And we picked that up, you picked that up, and must have been your parents, your dad probably was a great appreciator. And
Right.
I was telling the audience just now about some of our musical heroes. I remember Horace Silver would sit around watching Hopalong Cassidy movies, and Idris Muhammad, a certain select, and Charlie Parker. As a kid growing up in Kansas City, he was going to the Westlands every Saturday to go see Buck Jones and Tom Mix and all these people. So we all had that as a background.
Sonny Rollins.
Sonny Rollins, my friend Mr. Sonny Rollins,
What
I
was the
speak
name of that album he did? Something the West. What
Way
was it?
out west.
way out west, and he
Way Out
plays. I'm an old cowhand. That's it. And he recorded that. That's it. And Sonny is from the Virgin Islands, so he and I talk on the phone, and he doesn't play the saxophone anymore because he had a really unfortunate setback after 9/11, and he was in that area where the fumes and the thing got down in his lungs, and it made him too challenged to blow those incredible notes that he blew, right? But you talk about a man of peace and tranquility, and his favorite phrase is it's all good. It's all good. And we talk on the phone for an hour, and we just kick it around. And he was a Cowboy fan too. And he brought, when Sonny played, a big reference for him was just music period. It was showbiz. It was songs by Bing Crosby, songs by Roy Rogers, songs by so we have a sense we're not just one track minded about this is it, not that. And that's
right.
in fact I had a bit of a struggle when
Amen.
so we're out of many one people, but it's many influences, joyful memories. And when people say who's your favorite piano player, man, I got 200 piano players are my favorite. And my favorite piano player, I tell them, is a guy that when he did what he did, it was like I wish he was the piano player. I tell him my favorite piano player is Muhammad Ali. What do you mean? He don't play piano. But Ali, movement in the ring, he was always changing up. It never was one track minded. He knew how to
That's right.
bob and weave, So
That's right.
let me say this, Alan. It's such a privilege to talk to you like this, and I don't know if the people appreciate it like I am.
I
But
love you, Monty.
it's a beautiful moment for me.
I wish all your audience could be a fly on the wall when you and I are together.
Well, we're gonna find a fly on the wall, brother. Get the flag at the wall, and you supply the movie. All right.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
Have a beautiful rest of the day, Alan and Pat.
Okay.
Take care, champ. Bye bye.
Bye.
Wait. We going out. Wait,
Uh-huh,
hold on.
uh-huh.
Let me see Cat's face real quick.
Miss Cat, you got to show your face. Come around.
I may have to charge you for that.
No.
Oh.
This is co-pilot. This is
I don't know
co-pilot.
if you can see me. I can see what you're seeing, but here I
Hey,
am.
you remember?
Hello there. Well, I'm just gonna brag about your lovely wife being back, because the world, if the world doesn't know, Kat comes from some royalty out of Italy, where her father was a screenwriter, and we're talking about some great stuff, and we can go on and on about that, but that's another day. I love you.
I love you more.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye, Monty.
All the best, Alan.
Okay.
Pat, bye-bye. That's a whole lot of fun, folks. Now I've been running my big mouth for the last good 50 minutes or so or more. And I promised myself that I would also mention going to Europe. Abby, my friend, asked me tell him about Europe. And I started going to Europe in 1974. And I recorded with the MPS label up in the Black Forest and made some records that people said were sensational because they were swinging. And it was all because of Oscar Peterson. And Oscar Peterson heard me play, and somehow, some way, some why, he decided to share this appreciation for me, this young fellow from another place, with his record company label that was called MPS in Germany. And he said, record Monty Alexander. And indeed, I made about 8 albums, 9, 10, I'm not sure, I don't remember. And among them was what has become a kind of classic benchmark record that was fortunate recorded at the Montreux Jazz Festival in 1976. So I'd come in 1974, and then not long after that, I paired up with these two very outstanding musicians who came out of Indiana University. They went there to study music, and they joined me. The first one was John Clayton, bassist extraordinaire, and we struck up a beautiful friendship. And it was all serendipity when John joined me, because my bassist that was playing with me, a guy named Benny Nelson from Philadelphia, had an eye injury, and he couldn't make that next job I was supposed to do. And at that moment, when I was looking for another bass player, John Clayton called me on the phone. Hey John, I remember meeting you a few years ago, and you've been at school, and how is it going? It's going fine. I said, what are you doing? He says, I just got out of school. I said, are you available? And it was perfect timing. It was almost a spiritual moment. And he joined me. We went to Annapolis, Maryland. The drummer playing with me was none other than the great Louis Hayes, who had been with Cannonball Adderley. And we played for a week. And then the second week, he recommended his good buddy, who I had met once before, named Jeff Hamilton. So that trio somehow, even though I had these great trios, Eugene Wright, Bobby Durham, Duffy Jackson, awesome drummer, Paul Bernal, bass player, when I met these two men, they had a camaraderie among themselves. And combined with my, whatever you want to call it, my leadership and my choice of what to play and the value that I had for them as people, that's how this Monty Alexander trio with John Clayton and Jeff Hamilton, Alexander Clayton Hamilton, came about. And it was such a, we used to hit home runs every time we played. It was a way of saying, like, forget it, the roof would come off from the joy and the swinging. And when people appreciated joy and swinging, things may have changed a bit. And we blazed a trail of enjoyment all over Europe in those early few years. And one of the places we played was Montreux, Switzerland, and it was recorded. It's called Montreux Alexander, and that was exemplified this trio of Monty with John and Jeff. And the big thing about it, there was real friendship. It was a respect and a friendship and an appreciation. And me, who has a trouble with, sticking with one thing.
Can I comment something that I heard you three say that Montreux that night was okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. That night we played that, all these younger piano players think, oh, that's the greatest record. Well, one of them. We thought it was that was okay, because we were playing in other places. And I have these recordings, one day the world's going to hear them, of this trio playing where it's beyond category, beyond expression. They talk about a trio, which is a bass, the piano, and the drums. This is not a trio. This music was not just music, it was magic. Magic you can't define, and I couldn't define it, right? So this was a marvelous time. Jeff Hamilton, who was already outstanding, came into his own more so, and then later on he started playing with the great Ray Brown, who was the man that really introduced me to John Clayton. So Ray Brown was the king of the kings in terms of what he did, the way he did it, the legacy of Jimmy Blanton from the Duke Ellington Orchestra. So John and Jeff are presence, there's a presence of those two men in the scene of today, the way they guide younger guys coming up about the integrity of this music, because if you didn't have people like that, it becomes like a real, it's just something silly to throw away. It's not valuable. And thanks to them and Wynton Marsalis for keeping the integrity and the dignity and the value constant, So I'm a guy that just was there, and when I played, I would bring fire and brimstone, we would say, and people would get excited, and the musicians loved to have me on the bandstand. That included Clark Terry, Sweets Edison, Milt Jackson, Ray Brown, Sonny Rollins. I played with all these men, right? And then I met Miles Davis, and Miles Davis give me a pat on the back, and he dug what I was doing, and he even said to me, I'd like to produce one of your records. He saw something in me that I didn't even know I had. Miles, this amazing musician, was taken with how I played. And I say it humbly and modestly, but this is a fact. And I got to know that man very well away from what was going on with his own activities, and we became friends. We went to the boxing matches together. So I was around these masters of music, right?
Didn't the story you say about Norman Granz asking you and John and Jeff to...
Norman Granz is a name that all of us must never forget. Norman Granz, who was a man working in the movies in Hollywood, he was an editor, I think, but he met Nat King Cole, who had moved to Hollywood not long before that. And they became fast friends. And the way I heard it, Nat convinced Norman that he could have these concerts but on a higher level and call them jazz at the Philharmonic. Now that adds a little bit of what we call in Jamaica stush. You got the stushy thing happening, and you raise up the level of respect when you say Philharmonic or you say symphony or you say concerto. Them kind of words, everything get more valued, right? And that's how it started. And those combinations playing at theaters, and Norman Granz would rent out these beautiful venues, the concert hall, Carnegie Hall, this hall, that hall, and they called them Jazz at the Philharmonic. And later on, he managed Ella Fitzgerald, the Queen, and he worked with Sarah Vaughan, but he also worked with Duke Ellington, and he managed Oscar Peterson. And he heard my combination of Monty and John Clayton, Jeff Hamilton, and it was a time where his premier artist, none other than Ella Fitzgerald, needed to find a combo because her pianist, Tommy Flanagan, was unwell. And he noticed Monty Alexander, what I was about. He didn't know I did not read music. So he came to me and he said, would you be able to join Ella and perform with Ella and work with Ella? I was stunned. I was playing at the Carlisle Hotel in New York. And I got that phone call and I said, well, I'm speechless. Thank you very much. It's a privilege of privileges. I don't know what to tell you. But I'll have to get back to you. And fear, F-E-A-R, was controlling my mind because I can't read music. If you put music in front of me, I start sweating. What's that? Look like fly poo-poo, you know? Yeah. And I never really did the responsible thing, which we're obliged to do. When you have a gift, like I was given, you're supposed to take it further. And I took it further just with real life, you know? The people I met. I went out of my way to be around these human beings that meant so much to me. Some of them weren't always on the right side of the tracks. You know, I mean, people weren't always doing the right thing. And there was a lot of drugs in those days, and we don't go there anymore, right? But Norman Granz was a true pace setter in our legacy. He and George Wein, more than anyone else sticking out right now. And they brought jazz to this other level, and I was honored to have a little rub shoulders with that crowd. I made a couple of albums with the Pablo record label, which was Norman's label. So now, as we wind down, and thank you, I talked about those guys in the great trio. I've been going 58 minutes. I'm going to try to call somebody and ask him if he would honor me with, okay, call that number. Hopes he'll pick it up. And I'm going to tell you, this man I'm about to introduce you to on the telephone, and I hope you'll hear his name. His name is Larry, and that is Larry, last name Alexander. Guess what? Same name as mine. If it's ringing. This is my brother, Larry Alexander. Is this my brother, Larry Alexander?
Good afternoon, Mr. Monty. I most certainly am your brother.
Brother. Well,
Hold the phone near the...
let's put it this way, Larry. I'm here running my mouth as usual, Saturday at 4 o'clock, reminiscing in rhythm or Riddim, or if you want to put it that way, I'm really reminiscing today. I talked about this, that, and I wanted to give myself the joy and the pleasure of talking to one of my favorite people in the world. I love the guy. His name is Lawrence Alexander. Lawrence Alexander, you've been through all kinds of stuff in your life, and you're at a time now where life is such a groove, even with the challenges going on around us. And it's an honor to talk to you today, little brother, who grew up on Tucker Avenue in Mountain View, Kingston, Jamaica. And we have survived a lot of things. You were in Vietnam. You came back from Vietnam, and you are here free and full of joy. What a privilege to know you. Tell me something good.
What do you think of the Jamaican boy doing in Vietnam? What arise me and you?
Larry, like
you say, thank you so much for sharing the moment.
Larry.
Listen, I mean, Tuck Avenue is where we were bred and grew up, about a mile from stadium.
Right.
And that was a sacred place.
Yep.
It was a very, very beautiful, quiet street, dead end in one end, and nice families on the road. And I remember way back when you used to bang the piano a little bit for mommy's guests when they used to come to the house. I thought that was wonderful. Other than that, Monty, there's so much to talk about because the history that you have written and the history that I have written becomes more explosive when the two of us are writing it together.
Amen. Well, you said a mouthful just there, Lar, and we have never spoken together, knowing that a few people or several or a whole lot of people are listening on this new medium where virtual kind of talking. There's a camera on me now. They see I got my cowboy hat on. I was talking about the westerns just now. I talked about Nat King Cole. I talked about being in Europe with John and Jeff. And I wanted to save the best till the last, and that's you.
Yay.
And I wanted to say your musical talent is still intact, as some people would say, more better than it used to be. Because I hear you singing now, and I'm just taken to another place. Your talent is awesome. And I must also mention the fact that you guided and encouraged a very talented woman to enter into this world of music. Her name was Phyllis Hyman. And you and Miss Phyllis blazed a trail of beautiful music that knocked them out all over the globe, right? And, you know, life did...
I lost you there a little bit, man.
What? What? Are you there? Okay. Maybe Larry is gone, and that's an unfortunate thing.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
All right. I'm going to play something, and if you feel inclined, all right, you join me. We were doing this the other day, and I was very happy.
I can only give you country walks in springtime, and a hand to hold when leaves begin to fall, and with love a burning time, now and evermore. That's all. That's all. I can only give you love that lasts forever, and I promise to be near each time you call. And the only heart I own for you and you alone. That's all. That's all. I am sure. Yeah.
Where at?
They will give you the world for a toy. All I have is arms to enfold you, and a lifetime can never destroy.
Brother.
Larry.
If you are wondering what I'm asking in return, dear, you'll be glad to know that my demands are small. Say it's me that you adore, for now and evermore. That's all. That's all.
Baba, that's oh yeah.
A
You know-
trio.
Brother Lar, I think you're little crazy. You're a little crazier than Monty, it looked like. So, I would,
Thank you very much.
my honor and pleasure. Call you back later and we'll shoot the breeze. And we will reminisce about Jamaican crossroads and halfway tree and Ocherius and St. Anne's Bay and Port Antonio and Aracabes and Negril and Montego Bay and all them, that kind of place. How's that?
That sounds good to me. I just went mosey around the house for a little bit and maybe half an hour or so, and I'm ready for you.
Don't forget to wear your mask, Lar, because Florida not as good as it hopefully should be. It should be, could be, because...
Well, it's me one here in the house, so I sure wear my mask, man. Thank you for that wonderful medical warning. That's great. I got that. Thank you.
Thank you, bye.
Bless up, Lar.
You're welcome, Mrs. Alexander. Nice to talk to you.
Bye.
You know who I said? Okay, gone. You know who I'm sorry for, babe?
Who?
All them poor people listening to this.
They can't see us.
They
They
have-
can't see Lara. They have this terrible phone.
But I don't mean that. I mean just my mouth talking so much, and I must
Oh.
have said, this guy talks too much, man. He talking to me. Anyhow,
Well,
I'm
that's
happy
it.
to share this last few moments with you, and thank you for listening, people. Wish you have safety, time.
Yes.
Bless up. Got my cowboy hat today.
Guidance.
Guidance, one love, and all them.
Wise mind.
Wise mind, not wisdom. Wise mind.
Wise mind and
Because
guidance.
wisdom sound like dumb, you know. We don't say words like that. Until the next time, stay safe. Thank you very much. Monty Alexander. Holy!